Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm super excited to be able to teach you how to draw these beautiful daffodils. These are the perfect spring flower. And so we're going to get started like we always do with our pencil guides. And what we're going to do here is two triangles, one inverted from the other, to kind of make it look like David's star or like a 6-point star. And so these are going to be the guides for our petals because most daffodils have 6 petals, kind of 3 that lie above and 3 that lie below. So our two different pencil guides are going to look slightly different. This second one that I'm drawing is a little bit more flattened because the perspective is slightly different. So don't make this one look quite as symmetrical as the first one. Once you draw the triangles, you're going to draw a circle or an oval on each of these pencil guides to signify that top of that trumpet piece of the daffodil that's coming out of the center. And then you're going to use a cone to connect it to the rest of the petals. And so these cones are that trumpet piece. And so the stem should be coming out from the center of these cones because this is the center of the flower. This daffodil composition is also going to include a few leaves, and so I'm just drawing some light pencil lines to show me where I want to add them later, but don't worry, I will walk you through this part once we get to that step. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and continue in ink so that you guys can see a little bit better, but I definitely recommend continuing in pencil and inking it at the very end. And so we're going to get started with some very squiggly lines along that circle that you drew where the mouth of the trumpet is. And so this part, if you look at a daffodil, folds in and out a lot, and so we mimic that with this very curvy lines, and then you're going to do a much smoother line for the rest of that cone. And so here I just did a few squiggles in the center to signify that small center that is inside that little trumpet or bell-shaped part. And so here is where we're going to use the triangle guides. We're going to start first with the 3 petals that lie on the top, and then we're going to do the petals that lie behind. And so you can use these guides as more as suggestions. They don't have to stay right within the triangles, or else your petals might look a little bit too small, but stay a uniform amount out or in depending on how you're drawing it. With this second flower, we're actually going to get started with this front petal right here because this is kind of covering that cone, and so we can't complete the shape of the cone until we complete this petal. And so you can kind of see that this petal is a little bit shorter, and that is because of foreshortening or perspective. And so once you draw that petal, you can actually do the cone the same way that we did the first one. And because of perspective, you're not going to see quite as much of the center as you did with that first one. So just keep that in mind as you're drawing it. And so then from here, you can go ahead and keep drawing the petals, starting with those first 3 that are above, which will be here in this triangle. And then we're going to add a few folds on these petals as well, because since we're seeing it from a slight side view, you're going to see a little bit more fold in the petals. Just like the first petal that we drew, these next 2 petals are also going to be slightly shorter just because of that foreshortening. Now that we have drawn the petals, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out so that we can continue this composition, including the stems and the leaves. And so I'm going to start first with the stems, making sure that I add a slight curve to them because we don't want it to look too rigid or straight, and making sure that they connect up to that center of that little cone or trumpet. So daffodils actually have really distinct leaves because they're really long and really skinny. So don't think tulip leaves, because tulip leaves are definitely a lot thicker, and so they're going to be really skinny, and they're also going to grow out from the base of the stem or kind of coming out from the dirt as well. So for this floral composition, 2 of the leaves are going to be really straightforward. They're going to be nice and long and straight. But the third leaf, I actually want to challenge you guys a little bit by having it fold over and then fold over itself. And so the way we draw that is by drawing one nice long line that's the full length of the leaf, and then connecting that tip all the way back to itself, and then adding one more line to connect it to the base of the stems. And so it's not too difficult, just follow the video. I know that my hand covered it a little bit, but hopefully my explanation helps, of curving it all the way, and then the tip connecting it back to itself, and then one more to connect it to the bottom of the stems. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment, or you can send me a private message via Instagram. My Instagram is @KarenB.creations, and I can try to explain that or share additional videos. So once you have done that, we're actually going to get started with the detail lines, which is the final piece of this composition. So my biggest tip when it comes to adding details to daffodils, it actually has to do with the mouth of that trumpet. So those little squiggly lines that you drew, adding short detail lines coming down towards the inside of that trumpet, and that kind of shows more of that folding and bending of that part to add that detail and that depth. Take your time as you're adding the detail lines. You know, you can pause this video if you need to. You can also rewind it if you want to see it a little bit more. Just take your time and relax. And if you're unsure of where to add the detail lines, you can do it in pencil first so that you like the way that it's folding. But my biggest tips for adding details is actually number one, to add a variety in the length of your line so that it doesn't all look the same length. Because if they're all the same length, it's going to look really static. My second tip is to make sure that you add a slight curve to these detail lines, because petals are folding and bending and dancing and just are beautiful, and they have a lot of movement. And if you have them to be all the same length and stick straight, it's just going to make it look like your flower is made out of wood. You know, just a flat piece of wood, and you don't want that to happen. So making sure that you add that curve is going to make a big difference to your petals. In this video, I do not add detail lines to the leaves. I didn't want to make the video too long, but if you're wanting to add detail lines to the leaves, you can definitely do that. If you want it to look like there's more shadow or depth and you're adding color, that's something that's easily added with paint or marker or whatever. You can add, you know, darker colors on parts that are going to be shaded. So this is definitely something that you can draw on a card for Mother's Day, for spring, for whatever. And you can add as many detail lines as you want, or as little detail lines as you want. I know some artists that don't use detail lines at all because that is their style. So just be true to yourself and true to your art style and do what feels right. Once you finish with your detail lines, you can go ahead and erase those pencil guides that you drew. If you have been doing this whole part in pencil, this is a perfect time to ink, and then afterwards you can erase. But be sure to give your ink sufficient amount of time to dry, because you don't want to put all that work in and then smudge your ink. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I felt like daffodils were the perfect flower to welcome spring. So thank you so much, and make sure to subscribe.